get this. A government-funded study about puberty blockers for transgender teens went unpublished. Why? Because of politics. At least that's what the lead doctor of the research told the New York Times. Dr. Joanna Olson-Kennedy spearheaded the $10 million research in 2015. It was intended to show providing trans adolescents with puberty blockers, drugs that prevent the development of breasts or a deepening voice, for instance, that would lessen depression and distress from gender dysphoria. Researchers recruited 95 trans teens from across the country, gave them these drugs, and watched what happened. Fast forward 9 years later, the results show not so good conclusions. In fact, there was no evidence whatsoever that puberty blockers improved the patient's mental health.
Dr. Olson-Kennedy, a prominent trans advocate in the medical community, admitted to the New York Times that she withheld the results of the study because of the overall political climate. Quote, "I do not want our work to be weaponized. It has to be exactly on point, clear and concise, and that takes time," end quote. Trans issues have been an issue on the campaign trail, with Donald Trump saying that Kamala Harris supports government-funded sex changes for inmates and illegal migrants.
The online community, including none other than Elon Musk, very riled up. The tech tycoon posted, "Olson-Kennedy is evil." Author J.K. Rowling of the Harry Potter franchise, who's been quite critical of the transgender movement, posted, quote, "We must not publish a study that says we're harming children because people who say we're harming children will use the study as evidence that we're harming children, which might make it difficult for us to continue harming children." This does look pretty bad for activists on this issue. They did a study. It did not reach the result they wanted it to reach, and then they didn't publish it. That's like the opposite of good science. And look, I want people to really make these choices for themselves. I don't want government to tell people what to do here. I think if you're of an age to consent to this kind of thing, well, then it doesn't really matter. It's none of my business anyway. Obviously, the debate is over whether children who are below the age of consent, can they do this with their parents' permission in the medical system, and how much pushback and actually interrogating of their desire, because I believe there are young people who would be helped by this, probably, but also there are a lot of confused young people because having your body develop and go through puberty is difficult for a lot of women, in particular, young women, and that this is not going to be the right choice for a lot of people. So if it's being recommended or pushed on people without really analyzing them and doing counseling and making sure that's the right choice, that's what I'm most afraid of. But here's a result that is not particularly favorable to this medical intervention.
Yeah, I mean, I can't really defend this, at least on the basis of a pretty in-depth article from the New York Times, of all places,
yeah.
So not an outlet that's going to be necessarily taking up the conservative cudgel on these issues. I mean, it looks for all the world like the person leading this research got results that she didn't like and then buried them. Now, perhaps she would have different things to say about that, although, as you noted, she's quoted in the New York Times story. Her argument is, in essence, that had the results been made public, they would have been used by people who are ideologically or otherwise opposed to what she wants. That just seems a crazy basis upon which to deny or to suppress, frankly, one's own research, especially when that research has been paid, at least in part, by public funds. So that's an additional problem in all of this. So, look, I think the issue about gender identity and trans issues and all that is in a certain way, that's a different conversation, of course linked to this, but a different conversation. The issue here is someone saying, okay, I'm being paid to do research, I'll do my research, whoops, the results aren't what I wanted, well, let's just push those to one side, and I can't possibly defend that.
And there have been a couple studies now. There was information coming out of the World Professional Association for Transgender Health, that there was some leaked documents there showing internal disagreement, same thing, not finding highly positive results from the use of puberty blockers. I know research done by some of our peer countries in Europe, including the UK, on this issue is they got a little cold to puberty blockers as well, because you're just not seeing the really strikingly positive results that activists on behalf of the transgender community expected or assured that we would see, and you don't want to introduce a very invasive medical intervention because they say that this doesn't have, you can introduce puberty later and then you'll go through if you change your mind and it won't have permanent lasting damage. That there is some, that's plausible, and then some people said that. There's also questions though about whether it will impact your fertility in the long run. I mean, it's a dramatic thing to do to your body.
Well, it is, and this is why I find it kind of odd that the liberal or left position on these kinds of issues has become so, well, I don't even know if so far to the left is the right way of putting it. I have pretty major problems with children doing anything that is not easily reversible, right? Because the whole point is that you don't have the maturity of adults to make decisions that are yours to make. That's why children don't have the freedom that adults do. So to defend from a left or liberal position the idea that, yeah, it's fine for this to happen to children, that seems odd to me. I don't quite understand what liberal position that is underpinning.
Some of these things end up being so inconsistent if you look by, and we're a nation of 50 states, where the policies are different in every state. The age at which you can get a license to drive, get married, get a tattoo, it's different in many states. I think sometimes it ends up being very weird if you can't you can't drive a car, but you could get married or something. In some southern states, or you couldn't get a tattoo, but you could have major gender-based intervention or even surgery. Seems wild to me. Well,
and in this case as well, Robby, I mean, we say sometimes in politics it's not the fact, it's the cover-up that matters, or it's the cover-up that does you damage. And I suspect that could really happen in this case, not only for the reasons we've already outlined, but in this particular instance, as I understand from the New York Times story, the doctor is saying, well, the reason there was no improvement seen is that they were all doing fine at the start and they're still all doing fine at the end. But in fact, there appears to be data that the test group were not all doing fine at the start, that about a quarter of them were suffering from depression of one kind or another. So what's going on? It just seems, the whole thing just seems really suspicious.
Well, right, and that relates to the fact that having gender dysphoria or even being transgender overlaps significantly with being depressed or having mental illness, and also for people who fully go through, have gender reassignment surgery, that overlaps with doing dangerous work. Sex workers are disproportionately transgender, and there's violence disproportionately against sex workers. So I'm often in conversations with people on the left who are saying, there's this unprecedented epidemic of violence against trans people. Like, if you look at the data, yes, they are statistically more likely to be victims of violence or murder, but it's not so much because there's like mobs of anti-trans people beating people to death. It's that selling drugs and being in sex work is very dangerous, and more people from this community end up doing that kind of thing. Yeah. Which goes to show that there's a lot of fundamental mental illness or health problems for some, we were describing a minority of a minority of a minority here, but of people in this community. And this doesn't seem like an automatic fix. No,
and I don't want to make light of the fact that there is clearly anti-trans discrimination, and it must be terrible to suffer from gender dysmorphia and all of that. And as you said at the start, if people are adults, I think they should. Yeah,
and I'm not taking treatment away from anyone. It's none of my business. Do whatever you think is best for you.
Exactly.
I don't care.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. All right, we've got more to come on Rising today. Please stay tuned.